Hello everybody and welcome to the latest edition of the FigureFourcast with me, Sam Gardner, and my resident co-host, Damien Cross. The sun is shining, pubs are open, beer is flowing. How are you, Damien?
I'm pretty good. I haven't had an opportunity to enjoy all of the fruits of the less restricted lockdown measures, but it is nice that it's been sunny, been able to sit out in the garden a bit today, and during the week it's been quite nice and warm, not too bad. So hopefully that weather can continue a little while, carry on into the summer. Hopefully we get a good summer now that we're allowed to kind of do some things again.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you took advantage of the sun. You're now a different shade of pale, so congratulations on that.
I'm trying not to get sunburnt because I burn very easily.
Yeah.
As various holidays have proven over the years.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen you tan.
I kind of tanned a bit when I came back from Lanzarote. That was like 10 years ago, so it's probably a bit hard to remember. So.
Yeah, I can barely remember this morning, let alone 10 years ago. But let's get into this week's wrestling.
Weekly recap.
This week's WWE. As a whole, what do you make of it?
It's a bit up and down this week for me. Let's try and think of the right words to put this. Raw was the best show we've had since WrestleMania, but that is out of 2, so that's not really saying much. And I've been kind of talking with you about it, saying, oh yeah, it's really good, you need to watch it, but I was just kind of saying that. Yeah, it's not been great, Raw. And SmackDown actually was good. I quite enjoyed the threads that we got in SmackDown, so why the writers can't do the same for Raw, I don't know, but there's always a bit of a lull post-Mania in some of the stories, so that's kind of to be expected. What have your opinions been, just kind of overall on the shows?
Well, as you know, I think Raw is a massive pile of poop, and I don't mind SmackDown, so that's generally my opinions. And like you say, it's baffling how it's the exact same writers on both shows, and there's such a contrast between Raw and SmackDown quality. It's crazy to think, like, how can you be getting it so right for SmackDown and so wrong for Raw? It's not like all of the performers on Raw are garbage. There's some really good performers on Raw, as there is on SmackDown, so come on, sort it out.
Yeah, I don't get how you can have kind of two sides that are so vastly different in quality when realistically they should be kind of similar. Maybe the tone of the shows might be a bit different, as that's always kind of been the way the show's been portrayed in the past, but it's not been up to scratch.
No, yeah, it hasn't. And this week we're going to be doing a review of the week's action a little bit different. So we're going to focus on the main 4 titles on the main roster. So Universal Championship, WWE Championship, and both of the women's on either brands. And speaking of the Women's Championship, I think the perfect place to start would be the Raw Women's Championship. And interesting developments this week. Obviously, coming off WrestleMania, Ripley is the champion. She defeated Asuka in a really good match. I enjoyed it at Mania. And an extra sort of dimension has been added over the last week or so, with Charlotte Flair coming into the picture. There was a match between Asuka and Charlotte on Raw, which would ultimately end with some Ripley interruption, as Charlotte had Asuka in the figure 8. She pulled her arms out, and this sort of turned Charlotte to flip. She attacked the referee and got a in-story 100k fine.
You're forgetting she also got a suspension as well. That is a key part of this.
She got a suspension. Okay, cool. So what do you make of Charlotte being added to the Raw Women's title picture?
My opinion on this story will hinge on how it ends. Because if it ends with Rhea Ripley beating Charlotte in a big match and getting that kind of moment that she should have had at WrestleMania 36, then I will be completely fine with this, because she is a top performer and she does elevate kind of stories she's in. Unfortunately, in the past she has gone over when perhaps she didn't need to, and I do still worry that might happen again. So if Charlotte Flair wins this feud, then it was a bad decision. Like, why would you make the first feud out of Mania the one where your champion loses? You kind of want to build them up to look good.
Yeah.
But I do think she'll add something to this story. I know a lot of people don't like Charlotte Flair, and it tends to be just on how WWE have used her rather than her as a performer. So I kind of am in that boat. I feel like WWE make a lot of poor choices with how they have booked her and not brought other women up in the division at the same time. And hopefully this isn't that. The getting suspended is quite an interesting thing. It is something that WWE have touched on before. I believe Brock Lesnar got suspended shortly after WrestleMania once as a way to write him off TV for a couple of months. So how that will play out will be quite interesting. But I'm not completely opposed to the story, but I am a little bit hesitant to enjoy it based on how WWE have booked similar things in the past. Hopefully we're proven wrong at the end though.
Yeah, I'd agree with what you say there. I like Charlotte. I think she elevates everyone that she is in a match with. But it's been questionable as to how WWE have booked her over the past, as you say. So I guess time will tell with this story. I don't really know where it's going, to be honest. Obviously we've got WrestleMania Backlash in a couple of weeks' time. Don't know if they're going to do a triple threat there or something. It sort of seems like it's a bit early to do a triple threat between the three of them at WrestleMania Backlash. I think ultimately it's going to lead to Asuka having a little bit of time off, and hopefully sort of the time off will regenerate her character, if you want, and build up her hype to a return. Because I was saying before WrestleMania, let alone now, she just feels a little bit stale, and it's no fault of her own. It's just the way that she was booked as the champion, and now she sort of seems to be a little bit of a floater. Like, she doesn't really have any purpose. You know what I mean? Obviously she's going for the championship, but there's no real sort of story there. It's just, oh, I've lost the championship, I'm going back for it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even think I'd be against Charlotte winning the title down the line. But yeah, Ripley's first defence, I think she has to retain. Otherwise, any credibility she's got goes out the window.
They're in a good position for the Raw Women's title as well. You've got 3 performers there who are all main event caliber, with a little tweak to some of the booking for Asuka. She'll feel kind of worthy of that spot. Again, she's very talented, but she's just not been booked right. A little bit of a change there, and you'll feel that she deserves everything again, because we all know that she does. Charlotte Flair obviously is Charlotte Flair. Don't really need to add anything more on that one. But there's rumours of Becky Lynch's return being imminent, as well as, I don't want to talk about it too much, but they're teasing the split of Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. So either of those could be worthy opponents for Rhea Ripley. Kind of a post-split, you can build a story around them, and you can build quite a good division then around kind of those 5 as being kind of top opponents. And I know I probably might get a lot of flack for saying that Nia Jax is a top performer in the Raw Women's division, but she has kind of a unique appearance that you can build stuff around her being this force that no one can deal with. Like, they've kind of done that her entire career, and it's because it works. Once you lose some of the questionable storylines, she can be used as a kind of a monster heel type character, and I feel like you could build a good division around that. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing how the Raw Women's title scene plays out as we build up towards SummerSlam, which is obviously the next big pay-per-view. There's a lot they can do with it, and I'm hoping for good things.
Yeah, definitely. And I imagine if Becky Lynch did come back and there's crowds at SummerSlam, fingers crossed, oh, it'd be amazing. But let's switch over to the men's picture on Raw. the WWE Championship. Drew McIntyre is obviously he's number one contender. Am I right in saying for Backlash?
Yeah, he won the triple threat last week, I believe. Over
That's right,
Braun Strowman and Randy Orton.
Yeah, that's it. And obviously, after last week, he was attacked by T-Bar, and Mace. This week, MVP came out and said there's no affiliation between the Hurt Business and these ex-Retribution members who inexplicably were still wearing their Retribution gear.
So at the beginning of the show, after MVP had been like, they're not with us, they came out and attacked Drew McIntyre and chokeslammed him, and that set up kind of a story running through like the first half of the show where Drew wanted a match with them. It started off as a handicap match, Drew taking them on by himself. Unfortunately, they kind of playing up the heel roles, attacked him, got themselves disqualified, and Braun Strowman came out to even the odds. And then we kind of saw that big match where Braun and Drew McIntyre had the tag match. They actually removed the masks of both of Mace and T-Bar, attacking them with the mask and getting themselves disqualified, and kind of leaving the story a bit in limbo of not really sure what's going on. It was a weird kind of thing for the main title picture story. It was kind of middle of the show. It wasn't main event or even close to it. Obviously, they didn't have Bobby Lashley on the show. He's due to come back next week, and that may have hurt kind of. But I'm guessing they decided he wasn't going to be on there. It wasn't like Bobby was like, "Oh, I'm not feeling it this week." Well, I'll look at it as two things. For Mace and T-Bar, this is good. They've managed to drop the masks in a way that makes sense.
Do we still have to call them Mace and T-Bar now? That's stupid.
Assuming they don't come back out with the masks next week, you've kind of been able to drop that gimmick in a way that makes sense. They pick up a DQ win, but they still picked up a win over two top stars on Raw, and they're in a good position for them. Like, if you was either of those guys, you'd kind of be reasonably happy to be booked in that kind of position with top star like Drew McIntyre and Braun Strowman. So, on the flip side, what do Drew and Braun benefit from this story? Drew's obviously going to have a title match at WrestleMania Backlash. Presumably he's going to lose. And then I don't know what you do for either of them kind of going forward.
Why is Braun Strowman getting involved after losing in a match involving McIntyre last week? What the hell are Teabag and Pace doing? Bloody hell. Dominic.
That wasn't even an imaginative name. Pace?
When you think of something that is derogatory that rhymes with Mace or sounds like Mace, I'm just going to call him Dominic Dijakovic and Dio Madden. There we go.
Yeah.
The two goobers, the Retribution goobers. Why are they getting involved? It's all just bollocks, man. It's just so rubbish. I just can't get into it at all. WrestleMania Backlash, we just call WrestleMania Rematch because that's the way it seems to be going at the minute. It's just all rematches. That's my thoughts. That noise is exactly my thoughts.
Yeah. It's not a good story. I'm not sure why WWE have gone down this route. If I was in charge, you could have just... One, I wouldn't have had the Hurt Business split up because you could just have them attacking Drew and it all kind of makes sense. You put Mace and T-Bar in the tag division, they can look dominant. I mean, I suppose the champions, it wouldn't quite match up, but they can take on some of the other teams and look dominant in there, and you can build to what should be a pretty good match between Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. But yeah, it kind of feels like on Raw. I don't know if you ever played the universe mode in WWE games enough to kind of seen this, but if you simmed to like a year ahead, you just kind of get random weird matchups where the game was trying to make decisions and didn't know what was going on, and you'd have like WWE champion Elias defending his title against like The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin. You're like, what are you doing, game? Like, what? You just picked people at random. It kind of feels like WWE are doing that a little bit with Raw, where they're going, right, we need to have a match. Let's rummage through the big hat of names, and Drew and Braun, they're going to be a tag match, and who are they going to face? Retribution. Okay, let's do that story. I mean, I guess it could work, but it hasn't. And an already difficult to watch show, because Raw is 3 hours and that is a long time, is being even more painful to sit through because things aren't making sense.
That's just what you want from your weekly television, for it to be painful to sit through, isn't it? I just feel like
there was good moments on Raw, but overall, it comes away feeling like it wasn't even a particularly bad show. It just was so middle. There wasn't very many highs, there wasn't very many lows. It was just kind of, it's Raw. Like, I watched it. If we hadn't been reviewing it, I probably wouldn't have even recalled so much information from watching it.
It's literally just the whole of Raw. I wish they'd just, like, literally just get rid of it all and just start again. It's just rubbish, man. From start to end. Like, even the Viking Raiders, whatever they're bloody called now, they had the match with the former Hurt Business, who now don't even get an entrance. That's how low they've gone down now they've left the Hurt Business. And it's literally just exactly the same as what they did last week, just cut and paste. Like, I literally watched this last week. Why are you showing me it again? Matt Riddle and Randy Orton. It was advertised as Randy Orton versus Braun Strowman, first time ever. No explanation as to why that wasn't on the card, and randomly you just get Riddle versus Randy Orton. Bloody Naomi and Lana, who are losers, they have lost so much over the last few weeks, and I have absolutely no investment whatsoever in them. They suck. They suck hard. Lana can't wrestle. She is shockingly bad, and I don't care. I see people on the internet going, oh, but she's still learning, she's training. Shut up, man. She's in WWE, she's on Raw, she's meant to be a fucking wrestler, she's meant to be good. She's crap. Put her in the bin. Put her in a bin bag. Maybe she'll end up on Mickie James's doorstep. And Naomi, why is she in a tag team with her? God. The only thing that I liked this week on Raw, and this is a low bar, was Miz TV. And Maurice and The Miz actually have chemistry. Believe it or not. Married couple actually have chemistry.
You'd expect them.
It's the chemistry that Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch dream of to have on TV. Like, my God, they work well together. And this tease split between, well, presumably John Morrison and The Miz is going to be good. Damian Priest looked okay. He wasn't completely squashed in it. And yeah. But literally everything else. Oh, don't even. I know I'm ranting big time here, but don't even get me started on flipping Alexa Bliss's stupid doll, Lily. It's been there all of her life. Give me a break. Give me a bloody break. As if one Fiend wasn't enough to have on Raw, spooky bollocks. We've now got two Fiends, essentially. My God. The only good thing about that is that she seems to be going back into the women's division and becoming a wrestler, rather than some stupid child ground bellend. I think that's PG enough to have. Sheamus looked alright. That was okay. I mean, Humberto Carrillo just got absolutely dominated, gets into the best shape of his life, gets his head kicked off. Never mind. But yeah, Raw, just put it in the fucking bin with the rest of the released wrestlers' clothes and send it to somewhere across America.
Well,
I feel like I needed that.
Expecting...
I feel like I needed to get that off my chest. It sucks.
I wasn't quite expecting a full rant about Monday Night Raw, but I can't honestly disagree with most of what you've said. I do want to point out, I don't think the word bellend is PG in any way. But I think I can't really add anything more to it. So I think we'll leave Raw there. Hopefully it picks up next week and we can talk a bit more positively about it. But talking about being positive, shall we discuss the title pictures from SmackDown? So we'll start with the smaller of the two stories, just because there wasn't a lot to focus on with this week, which is the SmackDown Women's title. In one of the few stories that isn't a WrestleMania rematch, we have been set up this week for Bianca Belair to defend her title against Bayley, and I think that's going to be a great match, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I actually don't think this makes any sense in the story WWE is portrayed, because Bayley hasn't wrestled really in a while, and then she's just been like, I want a match, and is getting a match. So we don't get it a lot, but I do kind of like WWE to set up their matches a little bit more. That being said, Bayley has been highlighting what she has been doing, and the segment this week, what did kind of make me chuckle a little bit, where she's criticising kind of Bianca Belair to the new interviewer, I can't remember her name unfortunately, and obviously Montez Ford is there like, what are you doing? Like, I'm gonna get Bianca Belair on the phone and you can say it straight to her, like calls her over. I thought that was quite funny, and it's WWE using some real life story to kind of tie things together. It made sense. It wasn't just she appeared out of nowhere. So that was good, and the match should be pretty good. Bayley is kind of great in that kind of heel role that's still a little bit fun, and I don't think it would hurt her too much to lose to Bianca Belair, so it will be a good opponent for Bianca Belair to have post-Mania, and to kind of make her championship reign have a bit of meaning. Obviously you need her to beat some opponents, so I think it should be a good one. Again, we'll see when we kind of get to the end of the story. We'll be able to look back and be like, oh no, that was terrible, why did WWE do all of these things? But going into the story, I'm pretty positive on it, apart from I do wish Bayley had kind of like won a match first. Like, she'd beaten someone up and then been like, look how good I am, I should be the champion. Then it probably would have made a bit more sense, but I can let that one go.
Yeah, I mean,
I like Bayley.
Yeah, who doesn't like Bayley? She's the best, man. She is the best. I love Bayley, and she obviously has her record-breaking title run behind her, which I think is enough to sort of put her as one of the top contenders for the championship in WWE World. So I am all for this program. A nice little program. Hopefully goes a couple of pay-per-views up to Money in the Bank or something like that. And I am absolutely for holding off the rematch between Sasha Banks and Belair till SummerSlam. Make it into a big spectacle at SummerSlam, the rematch, the big rematch. And again, hopefully have fans in attendance by then as well, so it'll feel like a big time event. Yeah, Bayley's just great. I think, like you say, it's not going to hurt Bayley at all to lose. I think she's now at that stage of her career where she doesn't need the title. She's almost bigger than the title as a persona in a way. Like, it wouldn't hurt if she did have the title. Like, it'd be great to have her run in the Women's Championship, but if she didn't have the title, she's still amazing. She's charismatic, she's great in the ring, and like, literally, everyone knows her. Like, who cares if she doesn't have the title? So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. We obviously got a little teaser of it last year with that mini program that they had, and saw glimpses of what they could do together. That amazing assault course thing with Bayley's comedy and everything. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a match.
I'd completely forgotten about that program. It just kind of completely slipped my mind when.
It does feel like a long time ago.
SmackDown.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, obviously that makes total sense for them to kind of go back to that with the title now involved. Yeah, can't believe I missed that.
I think Bayley got a couple of wins over her maybe as well. So, I mean, obviously Bianca came out on top in the the program long term. But yeah, they've got good ring chemistry. We've seen that before, so I'm looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
Let's discuss kind of which was the big story of SmackDown this week, the Universal Championship. Obviously at Mania, it saw Roman Reigns pick up the win fairly decisively. Obviously there was the 2 concertos prior to his victory, but he did pin both competitors, and we've now all kind of transitioned. We don't know what the WrestleMania Backlash story is going to be, because there is a stopgap story of next week. Daniel Bryan is putting his SmackDown career on the line for the championship. With the story being, if he loses, he's not allowed on SmackDown. He's banished, whatever terminology WWE want to use. And I'm quite intrigued. Like, kind of got to the end wanting to see SmackDown next week, and that's what you want from a TV program. You want to be invested in the characters and be like, right, what's going to happen next week? The whole kind of thing this week, obviously it started with Daniel Bryan wanting a match for Cesaro, the championship, and kind of being like, Roman won't give him a match because Roman's too scared, like he's not going to come out, and he's kind of calling him out. They had a great tag match versus Jey Uso and Seth Rollins. That kind of followed storylines with those characters, kind of like Seth being like, I don't need this, I'm going to leave. Kind of fits into his current persona, which was good. And then you got a nice little beat down of Jey Uso, kind of wrap that story up. And it kind of had me hooked from that, wanting to see the rest of the show, how it played out. Obviously, I was fully capable of fast forwarding it, but like when you're watching it live, I feel like people definitely would have wanted to like tune in to see how it ended.
But you just couldn't skip Tamina versus Nia Jax for the 5th week in a row.
That was
something.
That was the main event for me. But yeah, this story, I feel like whoever's pitching this story and whoever's writing it seems to actually have some understanding of how a story should be told. Like,
story writers understand story. Amazing! What a turnaround for WWE.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but so often stories are told in a wrestling way, like rather than a story way. And I feel like this story actually has a writer who understands a story rather than just understanding wrestling. We're gonna get some hate from possibly criticising. Then that's kind of my dreams of becoming a WWE writer out the window. But
oh no, would it?
Yeah, it kind of had a little bit of had a little bit of everything, and it's got me hyped. What do you think of the story?
Yeah, pretty much everything from what you just said. I love the match, the tag team match that they had. I love Seth Rollins. Sort of seeing him next to Roman Reigns again, seeing how they developed from the characters when they were last together. It was pretty cool to watch on screen. And you obviously saw a little bit of chemistry, but they've gone on their own different paths. And yeah, the match, and obviously the end of the match where they just kept spinning around Jey Uso and taunting Roman Reigns was pretty funny. Just ruthless from Roman to not come out and help Jey Uso at all. And the end is interesting. It's interesting. I did want to just mention right at the beginning of the show, I don't think Cesaro spoke a word, did he? It was just Daniel Bryan essentially being his mouthpiece. It kind of made me think, obviously Cesaro isn't going to win the title anytime soon off of Roman Reigns, and I didn't really have any doubts about that before. Yeah, it just made me think, that is literally the problem that he's had for the whole time he's been in WWE. He's got everything. He's got a good look, he's got amazing skills in the ring, but it's just his promo work. Obviously English isn't his first language. They just don't trust him on the mic, and that's why he's never going to be the top star in WWE.
That is a shame as well, because some of the times he has been kind of off script on things like talking smack, things like that. He can deliver kind of an impassioned monologue.
Yeah.
quite well. It's just never kind of fallen into place on the show. Like, I've obviously been rewatching some old WrestleManias, and like a lot of the wrestlers there had managers, and WWE have gone so far away from having that again. But if Bryan loses next week and he can no longer be a performer, could he be kind of like a mouthpiece, like a manager, and kind of do that? Like, I mean, they should just let Cesaro speak, and the fans will grow. They'll invest in it. Like, he's not so bad on the mic that everyone's like, "Oh no, this guy's terrible." He's so far from that it's ridiculous. Like, you would believe it. I don't know. I don't know what the missing piece in Cesaro's booking is, because he has a look that you'd think Vince would want to push him, but it's just never quite lined up.
Yeah, it's a shame. It is a shame, but just talking about the stipulation at the end of the show, obviously, if Bryan loses next week against Reigns, he is banished from SmackDown or whatever. It's interesting because Bryan's been talking this week about wanting to face new opponents before he does retire, and I think he actually mentioned Jungle Boy by name and a couple of AEW competitors. Now, not in a million years while he's under WWE contract is he going to be allowed to show up on AEW TV, but it does give him the opportunity to maybe go over to Raw, which I wouldn't be too keen on with the quality of content that is on Raw at the minute, but maybe more interestingly, go over to NXT, which, as you mentioned before we started recording, has been sort of mooted around. So there'll be some interesting matchups on NXT. Obviously, the champions Karrion Kross. We've seen Bryan have some really good matches against dominant heel characters like Brock Lesnar. Probably gave Brock one of his best matches in 10 years or something like that. The other year at Survivor Series, So, there's some interesting matches on NXT that could happen. What do you think is going to happen next week?
I think NXT would be a good position for him. A great deal of competitors that he could have amazing matches with. And in the way that NXT book their matches as well, like Finn Balor, you said Karrion Kross, any of
Johnny
the
Gargano.
members of... I would say any of the former members of Undisputed Era would all have great matches with Bryan. But Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa,
Pete Dunne.
There's so we could just go on and on here. But if I kind of have a feeling he's going to win, but not win the title next week.
Okay.
Like, he gets a victory, but doesn't count out or DQ or something like that, so he doesn't have to leave. But if he does stop appearing on SmackDown, I think NXT is the right place for him. Raw, I'm not sure where he fits in on Monday Night Raw. I don't think there's a place for him to where you can just drop Daniel Bryan in and go, right, you're in this position on the show, and it doesn't really fit. But NXT, I feel like you can do a lot with Daniel Bryan on NXT, and I mean I don't watch NXT really at the moment, and it won't make me immediately tune in because I've got so much wrestling I have to watch at the minute anyway, but it would keep me intrigued to maybe kind of check out some of those segments. So that's kind of a good thing for NXT as well. Like, you're going to bring some more eyes down to it's still the third show. I hate saying it, but you're going to bring some extra eyes onto the third show. That's a good thing for kind of everyone involved.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think will happen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that sort of concludes our main roster talk this week on Raw and SmackDown. Like we said, Raw, pile of poop, and it made me have a bit of a breakdown. So, please God, let it get better. Please. But SmackDown...
I don't want Sam to have another rant.
Or maybe you
better
do.
Next week.
Maybe you do.
Yeah, maybe you do.
Maybe you do want me to have another run. So, but yeah, SmackDown.
Watch your descent into madness.
Yeah, SmackDown's still pottering along and sort of developing stories like a cohesive wrestling show does. So thank you, SmackDown.
Question of the week.
We're back once again with a weekly question. This week it was my turn to ask Sam, and as there was no huge returns on the post-Mania Raw and SmackDown, my question to you this week was, what return or debut do you think would be the biggest / the best for WWE right now?
Okay, so it's an interesting question for me. Obviously, the easy answers that sprung to mind were like CM Punk comes to your head, or Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose, but I don't think that would be best right now, because we're in the no fan era, in the Thunderdome, and what's the point of having a huge return to absolutely no pop from the audience? It was my thinking. The same goes for sort of some NXT debuts. I thought Io Shirai. I love Io Shirai, and I think she's one of the best women's wrestlers, if not wrestlers, not gender specific, just anyone in the world. But I don't want to see her be ruined by the WWE main roster, because I just know what's going to happen. I'd rather just have her on NXT. So my mind sort of drifted, and I thought, who would be the best? And I thought about Raw, I thought about the main event picture, and Bobby Lashley. He is using the Full Nelson, the Hurt Lock, as his finisher at the minute. And who was made famous by the Full Nelson 10-15 years ago? My real life best friend, Chris Masters, was made famous by the Full Nelson. I feel like if he came back, it's not going to set the world alight, but he could have a little program with Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley was the first person to ever break the Master Lock, so there's a little bit of history back then. He could have a little program, go into Backlash, maybe Money in the Bank, and then he'd fit. I feel like he'd fit nicely in the mid card, and just potter along, and have some good matches. Maybe win the US title or something. I think he'd be alright. But I mean, it's not a very exciting answer. But I don't feel like a very exciting return is sort of suited to the times we're in at the minute.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. I did, just while you was mentioning that, did have a quick Google of Chris Masters, kind of how he is now, because I haven't been following his career after he left WWE. He still seems like in pretty good shape to be a wrestler,
He's
so
the masterpiece,
that's obviously
man.
a positive
What
for
do you
it.
expect?
Warn caution to anyone who Googles Chris Masters 2020 or 2021, as one of the pictures is a bit bit in your face, to be honest, but I'm not going to go any further into that. I think he could be an interesting. I'm not sure he's quite main event Bobby Lashley, but you know what? I'd be interested in seeing it. So,
would it make Raw any worse at the minute? Can Raw get any worse at the minute? Is the answer no? But yeah, I actually spoke to Chris Masters the other day, because he is my real life best friend, and he said he'd be up for returning to WWE. He's not had very many gigs at the minute, obviously with the pandemic and everything. So yeah, it'd be good. It'd be good to know.
You did touch on it at the beginning of saying about Jon Moxley as a return would be quite hype. I do think out of all wrestlers, that is probably the biggest one you'd have. Imagine a promo with Roman Reigns talking about running down the SmackDown locker room of how he's beaten everyone and there's no one left to challenge him, no one's good enough. And although it wasn't the best theme, but imagine hearing Dean Ambrose's music here with a crowd. Like, it's not the best theme, but I do think that is one interaction that would be just insane.
It would be.
I'm not going to expect it. He's doing quite well and seems quite happy down over in AEW. So it's a pipe dream, but I reckon that would be amazing.
Physically kill my soul if Jon Moxley went back to WWE and I had to hear him read a scripted promo again. He's just been amazing on AEW with his unscripted promos. He just has the most natural, badass babyface aura chemistry that I think I've seen since Stone Cold, and to see that be diluted in WWE again, it would just hurt me. It would just make me feel so sad.
I will add, in my kind of vision of that feud, he's getting to be Jon Moxley character on WWE. It's not him going back to being kind of the Dean Ambrose character. It's just to get that reaction. I feel like hearing that music. I'm not familiar with his theme music for AEW, so I feel WWE, even if they kept him as kind of that character, would go back to the old music. But yeah, you'd want the booking he's had in AEW, but that's my AEW WWE mashup match that I want to see.
May well happen.
So, well, that's the question for this week, and hopefully we'll have another interesting one.
Wrestling news.
Another interesting week for wrestling news. Before we get into the main story, there was a little story that kind of broke Twitter this week about Mickie James receiving a bin bag of her belongings, obviously after being released last week. Not really too much to talk about with this one. Kind of, she put it out on Twitter being like, this isn't okay, and it appears WWE agreed because allegedly the backstage member of staff that was responsible lost his job. But that's kind of like a small little bit of news that has kind of been quite vocal on wrestling Twitter this week.
Breaking news.
There's a fair few jokes.
Yeah, breaking news.
Made a few this
WWE
episode.
do crappy things to ex-employees. It's not really breaking news, let's be honest. Loads have happened over the years. Most notably, CM Punk getting his release papers on his wedding day. So, it didn't surprise me in the slightest.
Actually, it does sound like it was somewhat. It wasn't instructions from WWE to do this. It does seem that it was someone who just kind of went ahead and did it, and he has presumably lost his job. But it was worth mentioning just because it has been such a talking point this week. The big news I want to discuss, and we've kind of mentioned a little bit when we talked about the weekly show, is Daniel Bryan might be leaving WWE. The news kind of broke a couple of days ago with Daniel Bryan saying that he felt detached during the WWE WrestleMania 37 main event. I won't read the full quote out, but he kind of talks about that he wasn't enjoying it. He had a weird feeling and kind of felt out of body, and doesn't know if he wants to be a full-time wrestler anymore. And obviously with the story on SmackDown, that they do kind of tie in together of maybe he will be transitioning away from being a full-time wrestler. It had been discussed earlier in the year that he was near the end of his career. One of the most interesting things is in the quote. It was a discussion, an interview, with BT Sport, that he said he had a really weird feeling, and I quote directly from Daniel Bryan as, "Oh no, is this what it's like before you die? Am I going to die?" And then further continuing that book saying, well, okay, if that happens, that happens. But it was just a really bizarre feeling, and I don't know why or how that happened.
Weird.
So, I don't even know where to begin on discussing that, but he's obviously been sat before the match, or maybe even during the match, and just not feeling right. Something's affecting him there, and he finishes up on the interview by saying that he's been discussing it with people and trying to kind of figure out what's next for Daniel Bryan. But that's quite a weird kind of feeling to have before the kind of a main event wrestling match. He always looks like a guy that's enjoying being a wrestler so much, and if that is slipped, then that's not good news. Hopefully he kind of figures out what he wants to do and can transition into being a part-time wrestler or a producer or whatever it is he decides he wants to do, and kind of get that fulfillment back, because that's kind of one of the important things. You need to feel fulfilled.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to say, isn't it? Like, an out-of-body experience. He was thinking, is this what death feels like? That's such a strange feeling to have, especially, like you say, in the lead-up to or during a main event at WrestleMania. And props to him, because I didn't personally see that he was having any issues in the match. He performed amazingly, so wow, well done. But I don't... Yeah, exactly. I don't see Daniel Bryan outside WWE, if I'm honest with you. I feel like he had the perfect opportunity to leave when he wasn't getting cleared with WWE, and he got other doctors clearing him. If he was going to leave, I think it was going to be then. He's sort of been in WWE so long now, I see him as a WWE guy. He's obviously got an affiliation with the Indies before, but that's such a long time ago now that he seems like a WWE guy to me. If he does go down to NXT, I feel like that's perfect for him. He can work the part-time schedule and spend time at home with his family, man. That's what's important in life.
Yeah, I think it's 2012, I believe, when he made his most prominent debut. He had a match against John Cena on Velocity, I believe, years prior, but I think it was 2012 with the Nexus, so that's 9 years in WWE, and he does kind of feel like there's so many iconic moments with Daniel Bryan. He has had a Hall of Fame worthy career in the WWE, and if he does want to leave and do something else, I wish him all the best wherever he decides to kind of hang up his hat. The "Am I going to die?" kind of quote is a little weird. I have no idea what an out of body kind of detached feeling is like, but it doesn't sound too good. And hopefully his meditation and talking with friends that he mentions in the interview goes well for him. You'd hate it to develop into something more serious of a problem. So hopefully whatever is best for Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, obviously his real name, hopefully that's kind of what he chooses.
He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys I don't think anyone's got a bad word to say about. I generally feel warmth towards, because he just seems like a good man. He seems like a good guy, and I wish nothing but good things for Bryan.
Yeah. As a slightly lighter note to end the story on, he uses one of my favourite little quotes I've ever seen, and he's talking about not believing. He says, "I'm not a big believer in like signs. Most people think of me as this hippy dippy kind of thing because I'm a environmentalist, but I'm really not." I just love
hippy dippy.
the phrase hippy dippy. He uses it a couple of times in the interview, but people think because of the kind of veganism and environmental stuff, he just talks about these kind of hippy dippy, but apparently the real man behind the character is conscious of the world but not hippy dippy. So that was just quite funny for him to say that. So
from the vault.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about WrestleMania 1-4. And just by pure coincidence, these are the WrestleManias that you have watched in the first week of your punishment after losing the WrestleMania forfeit. So, do you want to kick us off?
It's almost as if that was planned. Yeah, rather than go through a breakdown of all the WrestleManias, because I feel that might get a little bit repetitive on them. I feel like it would be good to take the opportunity each week to just look at how wrestling kind of has changed. And then kind of when we've done this, if you have any suggestions for things for us to look back on, let us know, and we can discuss some kind of past pay-per-views or past episodes of Raw, SmackDown, or kind of whatever here. But yeah, we'll start with the first four Manias. There's a couple of things that stood out to me, especially with the first one. It's just how obviously different it is. Obviously, first Mania was 1985. It was a long time ago. 37 years.
Do you know what, that's crazy to think.
enough.
It's 36 years ago.
No, 36 years. I can't do maths. So the main sort of taking point is these shows are not going to be for everyone looking back on now. I have struggled a little bit with watching them, even the good moments of them, just because it's so different. Wrestling has changed so much in that time, even from how it's portrayed kind of on screen to actual competitive matches. But it is really interesting to go back and watch kind of where it all began, kind of thing. Celebrity involvements were actually more back then than what we've got now. The main event of the first WrestleMania has Mr. T involved in a tag.
How was he compared to Bad Bunny?
For the time, really good. But looking back
Here's
now,
a question for you. Do you know what T
great.
stands for in Mr. T?
Is it?
No, it's actually
like
his
drink?
name. And apologies if I'm wrong here, but from what I know, it's his name, and his name is Trevor. So it's Mr. Trevor.
I was thinking it was a name, but as soon as I had that thought, all names beginning with T vanished from my brain. So yeah, I mean, Mr. Trevor, he was an adequate performer in WWE. It was a weird main event to have for the first WrestleMania. I mean, Hulk Hogan, obviously back then, was like the peak of stardom in wrestling, so that kind of makes sense. But yeah, no title match for the main event. The WrestleMania 2, I feel like it's going to take some beating for a show to be considered worse than WrestleMania 2. There is one that jumps to mind that I'll be watching in a couple of weeks, but the whole thing was just so weird. So if anyone not familiar with it, it was shown in 3 stadiums: Chicago, LA, and New York. They each got an hour, and you could just kind of tell that the crowd didn't quite get into anything enough because they only got an hour of this big show, and it kind of took away from it. And you had 3 different commentary teams, and it was weird to watch. And then WrestleMania 3, that best of the ones I've watched so far. That was the pay-per-view headlined by Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. That famous match, and although match quality has improved dramatically since then, you still get invested watching it. Like, I know what's going to happen, but there is that kind of storytelling between the performers of it. So I would put them quite low down in my personal rankings, because what I enjoy from wrestling hasn't kind of found its footing yet. I don't feel like it's going to really get that. There's touches of it. There is a great match between Macho Man Randy Savage and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, which you could drop into a modern day pay-per-view, no problem. But I feel like a lot of what I enjoy from wrestling hasn't kind of found its place yet, and it makes it a little bit harder to watch. But I would recommend people go back and watch these old pay-per-views if you haven't, whilst the WWE Network is still a thing in the UK, because the Peacock thing is a bit iffy apparently in America. But yeah, they're really good. I don't think I mentioned WrestleMania 4. That was a tournament WrestleMania where it was all building towards a match.
Interesting.
Kind of the main event, and there's a lot of matches on the card. It kind of made it feel a little cluttered at times, but it was an interesting thing. It would be interesting to see if they could do it in modern day. Have an entire
I did it with
tournament
King of the
on
Ring
pay-per-view.
a few years back, like 10, 15 years ago. They had a King of the Ring pay-per-view, which was cool. Do you know what? My question to you
Yeah.
as someone who hasn't seen the early WrestleManias, is just out of pure interest, is there anything that you noticed in the first 4 WrestleManias that still happen in modern day wrestling? And is there anything that happened, any aspects that aren't in modern day wrestling that you would want there to be?
I thought there was going to be a big change at first, because the first one opens with the actual American national anthem. And Vince hadn't got away with it, but WrestleMania 2 onwards did change to whatever we get now. I
America the Brave, is it?
The piece of music is called, but it sounds like it. I think so. For the most part, you do kind of get kind of the feeling that you are watching the same show. It's just certain things have evolved over time. Like, instead of getting the big promo packages we get before the matches, they start with interviews between the wrestlers. But it's quite interesting that literally they'll be stood next to each other, effectively, kind of like a weigh-in, like boxing or UFC. Like, we get the impression that they hate each other, they're going to beat each other up so much, and they're stood about 4 feet apart being interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund. So, I don't feel there's anything that's jumping to mind that is so different. There is still kind of your distraction finishes, not used quite as much, but there's that kind of dirty finish to matches. There was even a squash match on, if I remember correctly, I think it was WrestleMania 1. King Kong Bundy won in 9 seconds, which is insane. And that's the first WrestleMania, and you're kind of doing that. It just kind of feels like everything has been developed on over time rather than drastically changed. So, aside from the multi-arena and one tournament cards do obviously stand out a little bit for their absurdness, but other than that, no, I think they're quite similar in most aspects. It's just kind of like the in-ring stuff has improved, the presentation has dramatically improved for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's very interesting to go back and watch. I'm hoping to get the same kind of enjoyment out of the Attitude Era ones. Familiar with a lot of the stories during the Attitude Era, but haven't searched out a lot of those pay-per-views. So it'll be interesting when those kind of wrestlers start popping up. I'm familiar with a lot of people. Bret Hart has made an appearance. He's not quite the Bret Hart we all remember, but it's like early days. It's going to be interesting as kind of more and more familiar faces.
Yeah, definitely. Not long to go now until you get to the good stuff, the good WrestleManias. Rock, Austin. It's a couple of weeks away for you if you're doing 4 a week, so something to look forward to.
Yeah, couple of weeks. I think WrestleMania 10 onwards is kind of where things really start to pick up.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 9 is an infamously bad ending to a pay-per-view, so that's kind of the point I'm hoping, or wherever it really starts with. But that was if you remember, that's the one where it was had a Roman theme, and everything was kind of shown off like that. Bret Hart versus Yokozuna as your kind of main event. So I feel like from then on we're probably going to be getting a lot more similar to the current way of kind of portrayal and just the match quality. There
you go, long-term storytelling, man. Roman themed, and now you've got Roman Reigns. That's what the WWE trolls say on Twitter, so it's proved long-term storytelling exists, man.
It only took 27 years.
Well, I think that concludes this week's podcast. Anyway, fun one. Different but fun. I've enjoyed it. So, thank you all for listening. And over to Big Daddy Cross for the socials.
Yeah, we've got a few more segments now that could involve audience participation. If you have any questions for us to cover in the Question of the Week segment, you can message us on Twitter at FigureFourUK, or if you'd like to be included on the podcast, we do have an Anchor link, which you can find either on our Twitter, it will be included there, but also follow along, it's anchor.fm/FigureFourcast/message. If you send us a message on there, we can listen to it, and who knows, we might be even able to include it in a future episode of the podcast. We also have a YouTube channel, which is the FigureFourcast, and you can follow us on Facebook as well at the FigureFourcast. And we will be posting various content across all platforms, so we hope you can check us out. Thanks for listening.